Last week, we had two Republican delegates, by the way, from New Mexico in the studio to talk about their experience at the Republican National Convention. You can see that interview online at newmexicoinfocus.org. Gwyneth Dolan sat down this week with two delegates from New Mexico who attended the Democratic National Convention. Let's hear what they had to say.
Diane Dennis and Teva Gabus-Levine, thank you so much for being with us today. Diane, you've been to, this was your fourth convention. How was this one different for you from the others?
There are two aspects. When I went to the convention the first 3 times, because of whatever capacity I was serving in, I was a superdelegate. This year I went through the entire process and was elected at the congressional district because I wanted to be there and be a voting delegate on the floor. So I was part of that. This was the most organized convention I had ever been to in terms of different cities and the kinds of things. Philadelphia was a wonderful place. So it was a very organized convention. It was also the most, interactive, let me say that as a way of talking about it. Lots of things going on kind of on the side, and the deepest bench of speakers that I have ever seen at a convention. Even in 2008 when Barack was nominated, this was a very deep bench of people with lots of history, telling their stories, and lots of personal storytelling about people's lives.
Teva, this was your first time.
Yes, it was.
So what struck you about it?
The intensity. Every time you look up, there's a senator or a celebrity at your elbow. I was walking around the concourses and I saw Jill Stein being escorted out by security.
Yeah.
That's just one of many stories that I have. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I was struck by how the city has changed as well.
Hillary Clinton probably didn't think she was going to get such a fight out of Bernie Sanders, Diane. Why is Hillary your candidate?
Well, I've worked with Hillary before, and I've known her for a long time, and I think that it goes to the personal storytelling that happened at this convention. I've watched her come to New Mexico and try to save places in northern New Mexico, old historic places. I've watched her come and help women candidates. I've watched her work with women candidates across the country. But I know she believes in pay equity, in raising the minimum wage, in health care for all. I know her well enough to know, and I believe the convention actually told a lot of that story about who she really is.
I think that was one of their challenges, to try to get more of that across. Teva, what drew you to Bernie Sanders? You were supporting him, you were a delegate for Bernie?
Yes, and I also worked on his campaign for the past year. The consistency of his message over the past 40 years, a message about economic inequality, which is a message that speaks perhaps more deeply to New Mexico than in any other state in the Union. And again, just his honesty.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, and I wanted to ask you about that, Diane. One of the biggest objections that people have about Hillary is they don't feel she's honest. They think that she is a liar. How do you respond to people who say they don't trust her?
Well, I think that's a caricature of her that's been drawn over about a 35-year time period. I believe that I've been in politics. Your positions evolve over time. You listen to more people. One of her great strengths is she's a great listener. She and Bernie had very different styles. His was big crowds, thousands, 20,000, 30,000 people at a time. Hillary's more of a 50, 100-person crowd. When people get to be in those situations with her in the manufacturing hubs or in the kitchen or at the Starbucks or wherever it is, you can feel who she really is. And so I think it's not about honesty, it's about what's happened in American politics about attacks, attacks, attacks. She's the most admired woman in America and in the world, but it also shows that a big percentage of people don't like her. And part of that is, will we elect a woman to be president or not? But I respond to it by, I don't think there is a problem with her honesty. I think she's been proven by PolitiFact to be the most honest person running for office among every candidate this year.
And yet there were a lot of people at the convention, Teva, who did not like her, and they were very vocal. We saw, for those of us who were watching it at home on PBS, we could hear these chants, kind of disrupting some of the speakers, especially in the first few days. Was that you? Were you out there chanting?
I was generally a silent protester. However, I went to great lengths as a co-delegation leader to protect the rest of my delegation's right to express their views. I said so in the press. I expressed that intent to the campaign directly at times when they made the request to dilute some of those protests slightly. But generally speaking, I think the protests were respectful. I think there was a lot of silent sign holding. I'm not sure to what extent that showed up on TV. Obviously,
I think
everything
we
is
saw a
very,
lot of that.
I think you saw quite a bit of it. Obviously, it's a carefully choreographed event, but this is a party that ostensibly favors free speech over corporate speech, and we wanted to make sure that those messages were heard.
So do you feel like those protests, the signs, the chants, do you feel like they were successful?
Yes, I think so, because obviously Hillary is the nominee now. She has come out against, for example, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We want to make sure that she holds true to that message, that it doesn't get rushed through in the lame duck session after the election. And I think we made that message heard.
Diane, there's been a lot of conversation about unity, and there was a lot of pressure in the lead up to the convention to achieve this unity. Why? Why is that so important?
Well, because I think we're going to win in November. I think that we have to be unified. And actually, all the data that's coming out since the convention shows that 80% of people who supported Bernie are going to be voting for Hillary. Some people are voting for independent candidates. Some very few number, 2.5%, say they might vote for Donald Trump. And we have till November to go. But I want to play a little bit on what Teva said, which was that, I think that everybody came with the idea that free speech is to be honored, but at the same time, that goes for both sides. And so shouting people down when they are speaking, I think that got overplayed quite a bit. I think people were prepared for that. But I saw so many people, Hillary people and Bernie people, going around with the TPP signs, no TPP. It wasn't just Bernie people. So I think that at the end, obviously we're both very passionate about candidates. And as the days went on, in fact, I had many Bernie delegates say to me, the more I've heard about Hillary and how she's impacted people's lives, I understand, why people are for her. And so I think those are important things conventions do that. They bring people together and bring them to a more unified place. And we have 95 days to go, or 94, or whatever it is now, and there'll be a lot more to be heard and listened to, and people will continue, I believe, to come together. We've had some unity rallies in New Mexico. They had one in Taos this week. There's other stuff happening. Bernie delegates are doing it.
And yet, Teva, I think everyone can understand how hard it is when you've worked so hard, and you said you were campaigning for Bernie for a year. It can be so hard to just in this 1 week to just be told, turn on a dime, and now we need you to do it. Bernie Sanders did give a really passionate speech at the convention, trying to persuade his supporters that now is the time to get behind Hillary. Even comedian Sarah Silverman, who was a huge Bernie supporter all over social media in the run-up to this, chastised some supporters, saying, "You're being ridiculous." Are you going to support the Democratic Party nominee now, or are you still not there?
I think Hillary's undoubtedly the most qualified candidate remaining in the race for president, and I think she'll win handily in November. That said, I would find it difficult to work actively for her election at this point after the energy that I expended on Bernie for the past year. However, I think I and the vast majority of other Bernie supporters in New Mexico will work to make sure that down ballot candidates win in November as well. We have a critical Secretary of State's race here. We're trying to take back the House in Santa Fe as well, and I think a lot of us are going to really focus that energy that's kind of bouncing around right now without a place to go on those down ballot candidates.
Diane, we just have a few seconds left. There were a lot of people here in New Mexico, besides Tavis, who supported Bernie Sanders and the political revolution. What's your little elevator speech about why they should support Hillary now? Just a couple sentences.
They just need to get to know what she stands for, and I think that's been lost in these criticisms over the year about all these, what I think are many made-up scandals about her. And, you know, Michelle Obama said she told the story of what made it possible for her to be on that stage, but what made her willing to be on that stage was Hillary Clinton herself and her genuine, authentic nature.
Diane Deneuve and Teva Gabus-Labine, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about your experiences at the convention.
And remember, you can see the interview from last week with the Republican delegates online at NewMexicoInFocus.org.